Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Tuesday night, and coming in from the studio from where I work, just sitting here. Thought we'd take a look at the weather going on, and you know, I was relishing the fact that I've gotten a bit of a break, albeit a short one, with respect to the tropics, but it does look like now that we may at the very least have a new tropical depression or a tropical storm to deal with in the coming days, and it might happen as early as late Thursday, or more than likely probably on Friday. So I want to start off by taking a look at a few things here on the satellite loop, and we're going to go to the wide Atlantic satellite view here, and I'll bring this up, and you can see pretty clearly what's happening. First off, there are two areas of disturbed weather that we're paying attention to. The first is east of the Florida coast, over through the Bahamas, and then out east-northeastward from there. You'll notice that the clouds are getting blown off from the west to the east. There are hostile strong upper air winds here that are going to prevent this from developing into anything. But there is a second area down in the southwest Caribbean, and you can see that there's actually a little bit of curvature already developing with this. We've been talking about the fact that in general there is a large area of below normal pressures. So I'll try and get a little tighter here for you. I'll just make this a little bit bigger. And you can see that the area of disturbed weather here that's in the southwest Caribbean is getting a little better organized. And all the weather models that we looked at develop this as it moves toward the northwest Caribbean and eventually possibly into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So we're going to pay attention to this particular system, if only because of the fact that it may be a player in terms of bringing some much needed rain up and down the eastern seaboard early next week, if depending on how this tracks. And we're going to get into that in a second in terms of how this is all being modeled. But let me just bring you what I think is going to happen here as we take a look at a couple of models. First off, I see all of you are posting on the chat, and I really appreciate it. So a collective good evening to everyone, and I will certainly come back to whatever questions you have. But I want to show you what is going on with the European model first off, and this is, there we go. So this is for Saturday evening. We are once again going to be dealing with a strong upper high that's sitting between Bermuda and the Bahamas, but the western edge of that high is going to run through the northwest Caribbean and on up through the state of Florida and into the southeast. So you can see the Europeans' reflection of the tropical system is that blue area with the circle enclosed around it, the height line, and that is the Europeans' view of the tropical system. And you'll notice that across the U.S. from Texas on up into Tennessee and Kentucky is a broad west-southwest flow. The jet stream is going to be relatively far to the south, so the alleyway is going to be open in between the ridge and the edge of that jet. So I'm thinking that this could be something that moves in eventually up into the Florida Panhandle and then turns and moves northeastward. And what will be key in terms of the rainfall will be that it will have to move up the east side of the Appalachians. And I think there's a fair chance of that happening. I know we're early in the game and it's kind of speculative on this, but the Europeans been very consistent, and the GFS actually hasn't been that far behind in all this. Here's the surface view of the GFS, and this is for Friday afternoon, and it already has even on Friday afternoon it already has a closed surface low in the northwestern Caribbean. So I mean, at this point it would probably be a depression, or depending on how broad the circulation is, or maybe it'll be a tropical storm at this point. The thing is, systems that come out of this area, especially this time of year, they tend to have broad circulations to start with, and they tend to take their time developing. I don't think this is going to be one of those systems that intensifies very rapidly, but you know, we'll have to just wait and see when we get closer to it. But the conditions are conducive for this to develop into something, and I think you're probably going to, at the very least, get it into a tropical storm. Whether it goes beyond that to hurricane strength, the models are certainly arguing that possibility later in the weekend as it tracks northward into the Gulf of Mexico. So why don't we take a look with the GFS? We'll have some of the new run into to view, and we'll see what that does, and then we'll go back and I'll also look at the European model. So let me just raise this up a bit, and why don't we get a hang on, so we'll set that up there, and let's this way I can change the region for you. We're going to start with the Western Atlantic region, and we'll put the precip on. Now this is the 12Z run of the GFS, so we'll look at this as not the new one, but this is the one that came out at midday, and we'll follow it along, and you see all that weather up in the Bahamas really not amounting to much, and then there's that low that's in the southwestern Gulf, I'm sorry, the southwestern Caribbean, moves up into the northwestern Caribbean, tips the Yucatan Peninsula. Now the GFS is pretty far to the left with this in bringing it near New Orleans. I think it may be too far west, and the reason why the GFS is too far west is that it has a much stronger Atlantic ridge, and I'm not so sure whether that will be the case this time around. I think the GFS may be overdoing the strength of the ridge, and to me the European makes a little bit more sense. So let's back it up, and we'll take a look at the latest run and see how far out we have out of it. Oh, we have enough of it out, so we'll set it in motion. Let me get to the first map. Now, it's quite possible, by the way, that some kind of surface low may develop in this area that's in the Bahamas. I think the winds there, the upper winds, are just too hostile for it to develop into anything remotely tropical. But there's your southwestern Caribbean low on the new run, migrates up, and based on the pressure here, we are now at Friday morning. I mean, this would certainly indicate that this is already a tropical storm, and it rolls it up into the northeastern tip of the Yucatan, again out into the central Gulf, makes the turn, and wants to bring it up toward New Orleans. So this run also indicating, and this would be a low that would go the west side of the Appalachians, by the way, on the GFS. But the biggest difference here is we take a look at the upper air, and you can see the ridge on the GFS here for Sunday morning. This upper high, and there's the reflection of the tropical system moving onto the coast of Louisiana. Now, when we look at the European, on the other hand, see, the European has a much weaker ridge, and it allows this to get to track further east. Certainly, it's within the margin of error where you could say that the GFS may not be too unreasonable taking a track where it is, but I'm going to bet on the fact that the ridge in the Atlantic is going to be perhaps a little less strong, and the trough to the northwest, by the way, which is also important, and I want to show you. We'll go to the full eastern view here so you can take a look at that. There's a trough that's swinging out of the Rockies that's going to play a role in this, and it's going to act as the kicker to kick it up to the northeast, and that's what the European certainly suggested. And once it goes by, it turns much cooler in the eastern part of the United States. That, I think, is a reasonable scenario, whichever model you wind up looking at. When we look at the GFS here, the stronger ridge much further to the west forces the track to be further west, and you can see it there. I'll make this just a little bit smaller so you can get a full view here, and there's your trough. It actually bypasses it to some degree, and then you have another shortwave that comes around and picks this up, and again it takes it further to the west, at least from the standpoint of the model runs so far. I'm just going to be curious to see what kind of rainfall it generates, so why don't we look at that. And on this run, and on its prior run, the GFS, you can see it produces substantial rainfalls of 2 to 4 inches plus, following the track of this up through Tennessee and Kentucky and into parts of West Virginia, much less as you go to the east. But the Europeans view take this and shift it eastward by about 200 miles, and it brings a soaking rain up throughout much of Georgia, South North Carolina. Basically takes this whole stripe up east of the Appalachians. I honestly think that may be where this is going. The first thing we're going to have to look at is to see, well, what exactly is going to be developing? How strong a system are we going to have? And after that, we can go with the additional details that we'll be looking at. Why don't we also take a look? I don't want to skip this part, but let's take a look at the weather across the United States. And by the way, you can see, at least for the new GFS through the 6th day, and starting into the 7th day, how dry it is throughout most of the West, except up in the northern Rockies. And then you can see how it lines up the rainfall with these tropical systems. Also, with what's going on east of the Florida coast, there's some substantial rains that are being produced over the state of Florida as well. But that's separate from the tropical system. Again, you can follow the track of the max precip, tells you where the GFS is taking this. And the European takes it much further to the east and up the east side of the Appalachians, which would make, again, be very important, because much of the area in the mid-Atlantic and some areas of the southern areas of the Northeast are really looking for some rain. Why don't we look at snowfall? In fact, why don't we back up a run too, because at least I'll be able to go out a little bit further. You can see on the snowfall that's being generated up into the northern Rockies, and as we take it out through day 10, which is as far as it goes, for those of you who are interested in snows, you're even getting some snows down into Colorado, Wyoming, and even to parts of northeastern Nevada, more substantial snows into southwestern Canada. So we're starting to see the growth of snowfall in the colder areas, which is what you would expect this time of year. With the deep trough in the west especially, that seems to be something that you certainly are going to see snow events up in the colder air, and the model is showing this from earlier. Systems out in the western part of the United States. You can see in the east, the weak front that comes through on Thursday doesn't do very much. Then you get the push with the tropical system running up to the northeast, and as that happens, we wind up seeing some cooler air dropping down out of Canada as we move through the latter part of the forecast period. So now we're at October 12th, by the way, and it looks like there'll be a couple of cold fronts with a couple of big highs coming down, and then toward the end of the period, you have a couple, it looks like a more important storm heading over to the Great Lakes. So the idea that the pattern, to me, overall is changing, I think is valid, but it's doing it in sort of stair-step fashion. So we're going to have to just kind of watch to see how this all goes. But certainly we're going to have a lot to play with here over the coming days, particularly since the tropics have decided that they wanted to get active on us after what seems to be a whole week of rest. And I happen to have taken my vacation during that time of rest, but it would have been maybe better if I had waited a little bit more. So let me now come back to you guys and see if we can tackle some questions. And let's see. Again, if you're coming on late, collective good evening to everybody. So I won't go one by one, except for Corey Badziak. I hope I remembered. I'm sorry if I didn't. My brain is fried. Okay, so the next named storm is Nate and then Ophelia. That is correct, from Tornado 1994. Martin M., lots of squally rain, 40-mile-an-hour winds in Florida. Yeah, you're dealing with that disturbance that's up there. It's mainly in the upper atmosphere, but there's also a fairly tight pressure gradient with the big high that's built down off the east coast. That's going to continue over the next couple of days, so you're likely to continue to stay pretty breezy there. Okie AG, you're happy you got some rain. Good, that's it. Awesome. you know, if that trough kind of, if that jet stream lowers as far south as it's shown, you might have some more rain chances in the longer range. Do I think it will start to snow in the Great Lakes and later in October, first part of November? You might have your chances, 99 Wolves, but you got to tell me where in the Great Lakes. I mean, there's a big difference between, you know, Sault Ste. Marie and down near Chicago. So if you could be a little more specific, it would help. I need the 11th one for double audio. Okay, Delvin, I'm sorry. I hope you're telling me that the audio is okay. Let's see. The Windy app. You know what, Corey? Do me a favor. Just tell me again. Is that the Vendusky? If I'm saying it right, if that is it, if that's the one, I did check that, but if not, just remind me, please, of what it is, and I'll go take a look, because now at least like I have some time. Let's see. Remember back in 2011, there was this early snowstorm back around Halloween. Also remember that was an El Nino year, I believe. So that was a strong El Nino year. It seems like it wants to do that in strong El Nino years, where you get these snows in October, and then the rest of the winter, you know, you don't get much at all. And that winter was totally snowless in a lot of areas. Let's see. Calvin Carranza, good afternoon to you. Seems like a weak storm forming. You talk about Awesome Gamer. If you're talking about the one in the Southwest Caribbean, well, yeah, that that might have a shot. You know, I think it's going to get to at least be a strong tropical storm. But you know, it's one of these situations where there's a lot of stuff going on in the upper atmosphere. Not that there isn't with the other ones, but because you have these, you know, strong, you know, some wind shear issues to deal with. You know, I want to wait to see what it does after it develops. I don't think this is going to be one of these rapidly intensifying systems that becomes, you know, a Category 3 hurricane. But you know what? We've had how many of them so far this year? So we've had 5 majors. A 6th one would not be a big surprise. Let's hope it doesn't happen, because this may wind up being something that we're going to have to deal with, and we've already got too much to deal with Irma, having dealt with Irma, Maria, and so on, and Harvey. Gefs and EPS members showing ridging day 10. You know what, Delvin, I haven't really looked that far. I'm kind of just, you know, trying to. I don't want to go too crazy. Cyan, did I show the European run? Oh, to some degree I did, but you know what? Why don't I bring it up again? Let me get to it. Let's show you the European run. And here we go. Let me just bring that up. Let me get rid of me. Okay. And so change regions. Let's go to the European, and let's take the hang on. All right, so I got the European up here. So let's do the European view here, and starting from 0. Here we go. So there's your low on the European. You see how the European kind of shoots it almost straight north, and then turns it northwest, and then north and northeast into the Florida Panhandle. That's the European's view, and then it shoots it right up the east coast, up the east side of the Appalachians. I think that that's the better idea here, because of the fact that the ridge on the European is a little bit weaker than the GFS, and I think that may very well be the case. Now, we do have the new NAM that we can look at, but we're going to have to use, the NAM doesn't have a tropical region for us to view, so we're going to have to use this one. We'll back it up. And here's the NAM's view. You'll start to see that tropical system. It actually brings it over western Cuba. And why is this not out far enough? Did I... Hang on. Alright. Well, the NAM goes out to 84 hours. So at this point, you know, you have it sitting off the west coast of Florida. The NAM does not develop this all that well, but it does develop something. So, but I think that the track idea might be a little bit further to the west than this. But again, I kind of like the Europeans' view of things at the moment. And since we have this up, why don't I just show you the Canadian, which also, you know, I'm not liking this particular viewpoint. Let's go to this one. You can see the Canadian with it. Now the Canadian, of course, likes to spin up everything. So, you know, it's spinning up this thing from Florida, and then it brings up the system out of the Northwest Caribbean and spins it into Louisiana like the GFS, and then carries it northeastward from there. So you can see there's at least some model similarity. Between all three of them do something. So I think that's important. The question is, which one of these is going to be the one that's going to have the better idea? And again, I think the European is it. Awesome Gamer, the tropical storms being dangerous. I think from with respect to something like this, this could be a heavy rain producer, and I think we'll have to pay attention to that. Buzz, my buddy, my pal Buzz is on here. Philip Bazanka, good to see you. I hope everything is going well. I'll talk to you as soon as I'm done. Let's see. Ryan Ford, is there a possibility that Index 90L could wind up going up the East Coast? Ryan, I think this goes into the Eastern Gulf. I think it maybe comes up the east side of the Appalachians, which would be a nice rainmaker for us. We really could use a soaking rain of a few inches, and I'm hoping that that is the case. There's a lot of areas now that have gotten dry from the last 4 or 5 weeks, so we could certainly use a bit of a soaking rain. I think that, you know, based on what I'm seeing, let's go with the idea that at the very least this will become a tropical storm, and then when we get to the next couple of days, we'll start to see how models handle this. We'll figure it out. And the next name, as Awesome Gamer you are pointing out, is correct. It's Nate. And someone else, I think earlier, also pointed out it's the next two names are Nate and Ophelia. All right, folks, look, let's call it a night. I am going to take care of a few website posts. So I've got one that discusses this on the website, so you can check that out at meteorologistjoecioffi.com. And my buddy Angry Ben takes care of New York City at nycweathernow.com. Thanks all of you for being here. Check out the Joe Stradamus store, okay? And you can link from that on my website or from my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi. And thank you for being very supportive and supporting me through PayPal and Super Chat. I really, really appreciate it from everybody. Thank you very, very much. And we will see you tomorrow. Hey, if this thing develops, get ready for 2 live streams a day. I'm going to have to gird my loins and you know, get ready and have a lot of energy. So take care, folks. We'll see you tomorrow.